That's no moon. That is a 3D print of the Death Star that I made in TinkerCAD, and I'm going to show you how to do it in this tutorial. So here we are in TinkerCAD, and I'm going to actually start with the ending right here. This is where we're going to end up. Let me open up my Death Star, and let's orbit around the Death Star and take a look. It's pretty easy to make this. You know, there's really only two things you have to make in addition to the sphere. And here's one of them. This is the equator trench, or whatever you call it. And that's not too hard to make. And the other thing is this little laser beam eye that we're going to make right here. And that's not too hard either. And you learn a lot by making these three objects and putting them together as a Death Star. So let's get started. All right, we're going to hit the Create New Design button so that we can start from scratch. And come on over here and grab your sphere, and we're going to drag that onto your work plane. Click and drag, and then let go. Now I'm going to switch the view into top view here, and we do that by coming over here to the View Cube and hit the top button. And I'm also going to switch my view to flat projection, the orthographic projection. A lot of people don't know to do that, but it will make your life so much easier when you're trying to line things up and make things look accurate. So the sphere, the Death Star, is a little bit too small right now. We're going to change the scale. Let's make this thing a little bit bigger. I'm going to click on this handle, and I'm going to drag it like this, but I don't want an oval, an egg-shaped Death Star. I want a nice circular Death Star. So I'm going to hold the Shift key as I'm dragging. That's the Shift key on your keyboard. And that's going to constrain the proportions. And wow, we could have a really big Death Star. Let's not go overboard here. Let's make this 100 units. And the units I'm working with here are millimeters. So I would recommend that you stick with the defaults here, which is snap to grid 1.0 millimeters. Let's just stick with the defaults there. So we're going to make this thing 100 millimeters large. There, again, there's your scale. And you can see we're at 142 millimeters right now. Let's change that. Let's go ahead and type in that box 100 and make this box 100 as well. And let's work on putting that thing in the center of your work plane. So if you're like me, you do like to fly around and orbit around, so I will take my right mouse button here, click and hold the right mouse button so you can orbit around, and hey, it looks like we're almost done, right? Like it's looking pretty good already just to put that sphere right in the middle of the work plane, but we've still got some work to do. Over here, take a look at the steps on your screen. We can change this down to, how low does it go? 3 steps. And yeah, that doesn't look very much like a Death Star. Or we can raise that up to 24 steps. And that's where we're going to end up. But every so often, I'm going to have you reduce your steps just so it's easier to find the equator on the Death Star. It's really easy to find your equator when you only have 4 steps. And when we raise this back up to 24, it's kind of hard to tell where's the center of this thing. Cool, there's the Death Star almost. Let's work on creating the eye for the laser beam. And we are going to use, there's a couple different shapes we could use over here. I originally thought we might try to use another sphere for the eye, but it actually turns out that the cone works better. So take your cone and drag that onto your work plane and let go. Cool, so we're going to use that cone, and we are going to eat into the Death Star to carve out that eye. Neat. Well, let's switch it over here to your top view, and you're going to be able to figure out where to position your cone a little bit better. I want that cone to be right in the front of the Death Star. Right about there is probably going to be good. And now let's switch on your view cube, let's switch it into the right view. And let's raise this thing up. You can use the arrow key on your keyboard to raise it up. If you do, what is it? Control and up arrow. Okay, we'll get there eventually. if you do Control and up arrow on your keyboard, or you can just raise this thing. Now the Death Star, we got to figure this out. Where does the eye go exactly? Do you want it kind of like halfway up the Death Star or down here? You know, I like to put my eye right about up here. You'll have to decide for yourself where you want your eye to be. So we're getting there. But I think we need to rotate this thing, and I think we need to bring it in a little bit closer. Remember that with TinkerCAD, when you want to zoom in and zoom out, use the scroll wheel on your mouse. You can also pinch your trackpad, but it is just way easier if you use a mouse. Also, if you want to kind of pan and scroll your view, use your mouse, push and hold the scroll wheel. Don't roll it, push it and drag it and hold it in. And you can pan your view around. Cool, let's rotate this thing. So if you hover over the curved arrow here, we can apply a rotation to our cone. Nice, click and drag and let go. And you can use your arrow keys. Right arrow is going to move that thing in there. Let's see what we've got here. Ooh, not exactly what I wanted. This cone needs to be going straight into the Death Star. Let's see if we can fix that. If I click on my top view, I can see it's not really where I want it. So let's slide it over here so that it is right in front of my Death Star. And you know, you can also, if you want to orbit or fly around, you can also click and drag this view cube. I'm going to move it onto my right view now. Hey, that is looking pretty good. That's what I want. Arrow keys are going to move that thing over a little bit. And what I'm seeing is that my angle is off by just a little bit. So I'm going to take this curved arrow to rotate it a little bit more. Now, a finer point that you need to be aware of. Here on the inside of my curved arrow, if I'm dragging on the inside of this rotation circle, it's going to constrain me to 22.5 degree increments. In other words, it's going to rotate that thing way too much. If I use my mouse and I come onto the outside of this rotation circle, now I'm no longer constrained. I move in 1 degree increments. Hey, that is much nicer. So remember, you don't want to be down here, or that thing is going to just jump around on you way too much. You want to be higher, kind of on the outside of this rotation circle. And now I can get my cone to be in a pretty good place. That's not bad. That's looking kind of good, right? We just need to cut that thing out. Pretty easy to do to cut that thing out. We are going to, you know, should it be a little larger? Should that eye be a little bit larger? I don't know. It's your Death Star. You make it how you want to make it. You can do a Google image search and you can go out online and you can see what images of the Death Star look like. But I think I might work with this cone a little bit more. Let's see if we can, come over here, let's see if we can change the base radius. Whoa, it's a lot easier to make that thing a little bit bigger. Is that too big, too small? I don't know. I think it's too big. Let's make the base radius 15. How about that? Again, your Death Star does not need to look like my Death Star. 15 looks about good to me. You can move these things around and make it be whatever you want. I am going to increase the sides here to 64. That might make my cut a little bit smoother. Probably not going to make a whole huge difference, but there we go. Cool. All right, now before we make the cut, we need to make this cone into a hole. Click on the hole button, and now you can see where you're going with this. Next, we're going to shift-click on the Death Star, on the sphere itself. So we've got two things picked up right now, and the order could be important. So first, click on the cone. Second, shift-click on the sphere. Now we're going to hit this group button up here, Control-G. Boom. Oh, I love it. Look at that thing. You know, that's not exactly what I wanted. because it's going into this cone shape. Let's see if we can fix that. Let's undo that. So Control Z will undo it. And I'm going to click on my cone. I'm going to turn it back into a solid so that I can more or less see what I'm doing. Let's back this thing out of here. I'm going to take the height. No, that's really not it. That's it. It's the top radius. That's what I was looking for. Let's take the top radius and see if we can take away the point. We're going to use the top radius to remove the point on this cone. See how that works? Now the cone has a point. Now that we're raising up the top radius, point goes away. That's what I want. So let's try a top radius of 6, just to make it a nice even number. And let's try a height of, let's try 7. 6 and 7. So I've got a top radius of 6, base radius of 15, height of 7, and 64 sides, just to make it nice and smooth. Cool, I'm going to use the arrow key on my keyboard to move that cone. It's not really a cone anymore, is it? I'll call it a cone. We're going to move the cone back into the Death Star. And if I click on the right view here on my view cube, we can really get that thing exactly where you want it. And be careful. Don't move it too far into the Death Star, or the Death Star is going to poke out through your cone. Left arrow key, hey, that's looking better. That is what I want. Let's try to cut it now that we've removed the tip of the cone. So I'm going to click once to pick up the cone, shift click to pick up the sphere. Oh, I forgot something. We got to go back to the cone. Click once on the cone, we got to make it a hole. Oh, that made everything a hole. Whoops. Don't worry, Control Z is going to undo it. I'm going to click over here in the nothingness of outer space so that I can drop my selection. Now I'm going to click once on the cone. Now I'm going to make it a hole. That's looking better. Now I'm going to shift click on the sphere. So I've got two things picked up. And I'm going to hit this group button. Boom. Oh, look at that. That's looking pretty decent. Is that the right size for your laser eye? I don't know. You can make it bigger. You can make your cone a little bigger. Do whatever you want. Is it too high up above the equator? I don't know. I don't know. Make your Death Star the way you want it to be. But hey, that's looking pretty good. Cool. Let's work on the equator trench. What are we going to use over here to make our equator trench? We've got several options, and the first thing I tried when I was practicing this was the torus, and I think you could probably get away with using the torus. However, I'm going to use, for this tutorial, I'm going to use the ring. So take your ring, and let's bring that thing into the work plane. Man, I really don't like the way TinkerCAD does this. Look where it put it. It put the ring like way out there in left field. Delete. I don't want that. Here's what I usually end up doing. I'm going to click on my top view before I drag anything onto the work plane. And this is bothering me. My Death Star is sideways. I'm going to click the home button over here, the home view, and that's looking a little bit better. Now I'm going to click the top view. That's what I want. Remember, we are in the orthographic, the flat view right now. You can toggle that between perspective and orthographic. Keep it on orthographic. Now let's drag the ring onto the work plane. And it's going to be in a much more useful location for us. See how that works? I like the top view and flat view forever. It's a really, really good way to work things. Okay, let's make this bigger. But remember, I don't want an egg shape. So I'm going to grab one of my side handles here and drag to scale it up. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key. If you hold down the Shift key, it's going to constrain your proportions so that you have a nice perfect circle for your equator instead of the oval. So how big do we want this thing? I'm going to use the arrow keys to position these so that they are perfectly centered. This is a little bit too big. Let's make it a little bit smaller. There, I want to only just barely be eating into my Death Star. So let's try 130. If you go down here into these numeric input boxes, we can make both of those 130. Okay, you know what I just noticed? We are no longer in my favorite flat view anymore. Somehow I forgot to toggle this thing back into flat view. Let's do that. Okay, looking better. And I'm also going to click on my top view. And now I notice, oh, I made it too big. So 130 is not the right number for us. Let's bring this down. Remember, I want to just barely be eating into the Death Star. Let's bring this thing down to, I'd say 108. Looks pretty good. So 108. Good. And you know, the height on this ring is too tall. We got to shorten this thing down a little bit. So I'm going to click on my height handle here, and let's bring that down. I'm going to make it 1.5. And now it's too low, unfortunately. So we're going to have to raise it up. And we want to raise this thing up to the equator. And I'm going to click on the right view here. I don't think I'm quite to the equator yet. I think the equator is right about here. And you know what I was going to do? I messed up. I'm going to click once on my sphere. Look over here. Once we've performed this cutting operation with the cone, I no longer can control my sides on my sphere. I was going to bring down the sides to a lower number, like 4, so I could see exactly where the equator was on the sphere. But can't do it because I've performed that grouping operation. That's okay, I don't need it. I can pretty much tell where my equator needs to be. I think that's the right height for me. Let's give that a try. Let's see if we can cut into our sphere now with this ring. So I'm going to click once on the ring, going to turn it into a hole, and I'm going to shift click on the sphere, and let's group it. What happened? What happened? How does it look? Let's see. Hey, that's not bad. You know, it maybe it could be a little deeper. I don't know. You control how deep you want that trench to be. You can control the size of the ring and control how much it's going to eat into your Death Star. But for me, this is okay. I am okay with this. Not bad. I like where this ended up. So if you've been following along, good job. I hope your Death Star looks fantastic to you. I'm going to wrap it up right now. It's time to get out of here and wrap up this tutorial. But if you want to learn one more thing, stick around, okay? You still there? This is a pretty good Death Star, but there's one thing I want to change. I'm going to Control-Z it, and let's undo that. And let's bring it back to this point right here. My ring is a little bit, the cross-section of the ring is a little bit too curved for my tastes. I want to turn this more into a rectangle. And this is a more advanced thing that you don't really need to mess with, but you can if you want to, because it's not that hard. Come over to this area of your screen if you've got your ring selected, and we're going to turn this ring into a little bit more of a rectangle by picking up these handles and moving them around. And keep your handles going straight up and straight down. And we want them to be about this long. What I'm going for is I'm trying to make this into a rectangle. And I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to make it into a perfect rectangle, but I can definitely make it into less of a curved shape than what I had before. It doesn't have to be perfect because when your 3D printer prints this out, it's not going to print it out perfectly anyway. Okay, so now what we had before was a more circular or oval shaped cross section. Now we've got a much nicer kind of rounded rectangle. Let's check it on the top view here on the view cube. By the way, remember, if you're on a trackpad and you want to zoom in and zoom out and the pinch feature just isn't working on your trackpad, you can always use these plus and minus buttons over here to zoom yourself in, zoom yourself out. It also works with the plus and minus on the keyboard. Technically, it's the dash and the equals sign on your keyboard, but you'll figure that out. Cool. All right, so how's that looking? I think that's pretty good. I think my ring is eating into my sphere about the way I want it to. Let's see if we can punch it out now. So I'm going to make it a hole. I'm going to shift click on my sphere. I'm going to group it. And let's see what we got. How's that looking now? Let's zoom in. Did that make very much of a difference from what we had before? I don't think it made a huge difference. And my rectangle is a little bit weirdly shaped, but it doesn't matter because when your 3D printer prints this, it's not going to print it perfectly. You can go back, you can undo that and mess around with it a little bit more if you like. But for me, for the purposes of this tutorial, hey, that's pretty good. This is a good first draft Death Star. You can always go back in later and add in more detail. Cool. Well, I hope you've learned something. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. And may the force be with you.